Hey, before some days I have started Ethereum documentation and currently I'm in the blog section. So I'm just reading the documentation and I will let you know that what have I understood about the same. So let's just start it. First of all, blocks. Blocks are batches of transaction with a hash of the previous block in the chain. Okay, the links block together because hashes are cryptographically derived from the block data. Yeah, so what block basically is like it contains the hash of the digest of the entire block that stands previous to the current block. Okay, this prevents the fraud because one change in any block in history would invalidate all the following blocks as all subsequent hashes would change and everyone running the block would notice. ठीक है सही बात है So prerequisites block why blocks to ensure that all participants on the Ethereum network maintain a synchronized state and agree on the precise history of transaction. We batch the transactions into block. What is block? Blocks are nothing but they are just transactions block batched into an data storage. That's simply a block. This means that dozens or hundreds of transactions are committed, agreed on, and synchronized all at once. Okay. There are some diagrams for the block and okay, diagram adapted from Ethereum EVM illustrated. Fine. By spacing out commits, we give all network participants enough time to come to the consensus. By spacing out time, we give all the network participants enough time to come to consensus. Even though transaction requests occurred dozens of times per second, blocks are only created and committed on Ethereum once every 12 seconds. What this para says is although transactions have no limit like at what time can transaction take place, but for block there is a limit like in every 12 seconds a block is committed. Okay. So how blocks work? To preserve the transaction history, blocks are strictly ordered. Every new block created contains a reference to its parent block. Yeah, that just as I said, previous for a block, it's a digest is taken and it's stored on the top of the newly created block. Second thing is where was I? To preserve the transaction history, blocks are strictly ordered. Every new block created contains a reference to its parent block. Fine. And transaction within block are strictly ordered as well. Means it means those are strictly ordered on the basis of the time like the transaction that occurred earlier is placed above the transaction that took place afterwards, except in rare cases at any given time all participants on the network are in agreement on the exact number and history of blocks and are working to batch the current live transaction requests into the next block. It's saying that under the normal circumstances, we are not talking about the rare ones. Everyone on the blockchain network is currently sitting with acceptance of all the same blocks. Like they are all agreeing upon the same history of blocks. But why? Because whenever a block is proposed, it is transferred to all the validators in the node, and that's why they all know that what block is currently there in the network. Rare case it's talking about when there are some conflicts or like two validators uh, uh, no that one like that was the case in proof of work, not in proof of stake. So once a block is put together by a randomly selected validator on the network, it is propagated to the rest of the network. All nodes add this block to the end of their blockchain and new validator is selected to create the next block. The exact block assembly process and commitment consensus process is currently specified by Ethereum's proof of stake protocol. So that we know what happens is whenever a new block is proposed, validators check it and if they find it suitable, then they just attach it, they just append it to their copy of blockchain and just pass the same blockchain and same block to their connected nodes in order to propagate it. And is there something else was written? All nodes add this block to the end of their blockchain. Fine. And a new validator is selected to create the next block. Huh? New validator is selected to create the next block. Exact block assembly process and commitment consensus protocol is currently specified by Ethereum's proof of stake protocol. Uh, Earlier days, Ethereum was using proof of work, but what Ethereum is using now is proof of a stake. Means after the merge, okay, proof of a stake protocol. So as we are currently on proof of stake, so the documentation are saying about proof of stake and not proof of work, but definitely we'll read proof of work as well very soon. So what is proof of stake now? Proof of stake means the following. Validating nodes have to stake 32 ETH into a deposit contract as collateral against the bad behavior. If you want to become a validator, then just come, give us 32 ETH and we will make you a validator. But if you'll do any sort of bad activity, bad behavior, then we'll either cut from your 32 ETH partially or totally. This helps protect the network because provable his dishonest activities lead to some or all of that stake being destroyed. Yeah. In every slot, spaced 12 seconds apart, a validator is randomly selected to be the block proposer. Okay, so block time is 12 seconds and the validators are selected randomly. Fine. They bundle transaction together, execute them, and determine a new state. They bundle the transactions together, execute them, and determine a new state. They wrap this information into a block and pass it around to other validators. What does it mean? Every slot spaced 12 seconds apart, a validator is randomly selected to be the block proposer. Got it? They bundle the transactions together, execute them, and determine a new state. Fine. So what they do is they take all the transactions that are present in the mempool, they execute it. They check whether these transactions are really correct or not. Like they contain the proper signature of the person who is sending the money or not. And if they find everything suitable, then they just propose a new state. What is a new state? New state is just the previous blockchain appended with a new block that just this guy has created, this validator has created. They wrap this information into a block and pass it around to other validators. Yeah, because propagation is done in blockchain. Other validators who hear about the new block re-execute the transactions to ensure they agree with the proposed changes to the global state. What does it mean? Whenever any other validator receives a new state from one validator, then he also executes to check whether the new proposed chain is correct or not. Assuming the block is valid, they add it to their own database. And when they're satisfied that yeah, the block that is proposed by this fellow validator is correct, then they just append it into their own copy of blockchain, and in that manner only the block is propagated to all the validators within this 12 second, and after the 12 second a new block is to be proposed by some other randomly selected validator. If a validator hears about two conflicting blocks for the same slot, they use their fork choice algorithm to pick the one supported by most staked ETH. If a validator hears about two conflicting blocks, इधर से भी आ रहा है एक block का, इधर से भी आ रहा है, then what will be done? For the same slot, they use their fork choice algorithm. Now I will have to read what is this fork choice algorithm to pick one supported by the most staked ETH. Fine. More on proof of stake. What's in a block? There is a lot of information contained within a block. At the highest level, a block contains the following fields. Okay, the block contains following fields. Slot. What is the slot? Slot the block belongs to. Okay, the slot the block belongs to. We'll see it after some time. Proposer index. The ID of the validator proposing the block. Okay. Parent root, hash of the preceding block. Okay. State root, the root hash of the state object. What is this? Hash of the preceding block. ठीक है, तो the state root क्या है? What the root hash of the state object? The root hash of the state object. Body, an object containing several fields as defined below. The body block contains several fields of its own. Body, object containing several fields. So what is body basically? What do you understand by body? Body means what all do it contain? It must contain all the transaction data. It must contain the hash of the previous block. It must contain unknowns. It must contain what block size. Yeah, there are several things like just read everything. The block body contains several fields of its own. Field, rendezvous reveal. Oh my god. Okay, no issue. Field, rendezvous reveal. Description, a value used to select the next block proposer. Fine. So every block contains a field called rendezvous reveal that is used to select the next block proposer in the network. ETH1 underscore data, information about the deposit contract. Deposit contract. ETH1 data, information about the deposit contract is stored. Graffiti. Okay, arbitrary data used to tag blocks. Tag blocks. Arbitrary data. Is there any sort of tagging in the blocks? I hope it's something that only. What have we seen? Randover reveal, ETH1 data, that is information about the deposit contract. This is graffiti. Now comes proposer slashing. List of validators to be slashed. Nothing, nothing. List of validators to be slashed. Okay, a tester slashing. List of validator to be slashed. What the fuck? What the fuck is written? I'm not able to understand it. Attestation, list of attestation in favor of the current block. Okay, deposits, list of new deposits to the deposit contract. Voluntary exits, list of validators exiting the network. Async aggregate, subset of validators used to serve light clients. Execution payload, transaction passed from the execution client. Bhai, I think I all this would make sense to me after some more documentation reading. But at the current instant, I don't believe that this all is making any sense to me. The attestations field contains a list of all the attestations in the block. What does the attestation mean? Just let's Google it. Define search all here web search. Yep, web search. Attestation, what is it? An act of an act or instance of attesting something. What the fuck? What do attestation mean? The act or instance of proving the existence of something through evidence. ठीक है. To prove the existence of something by providing the evidence. So what does attestation means here? The attestation field contain a list of all the attestations in the block to prove that something is here. Yeah, meaning is that only. Attestations have their own data type that contains several pieces of data. Each attestation contain each attestation contain attestation bits, a list of which validators participated in this attestation. Data, a container with multiple subfields. Signature, aggregate signature of all attesting validators. Huh. Just wait. Just wait. Listen to me. It said that it will select one randomly selected validator, and now it's saying contains aggregate signature of all attesting validators. What the fuck is going, like, are there more than one validators or there a single validator? ah I don't understand. I As per my understanding there only be a single validator, but why is it saying aggregate signature of all attesting validators? I don't understand, or I'm not able to understand the what is the meaning of attesting validators. Attestation field contains the list of all attestations of the block. Attestations have their own data type that contains several pieces of data. Attestation contains the data field in the attestation contains the following. Data field in the attestation means, can you imagine like at what depth are we moving? There is something attestation, there is some data field, and now we are looking at what does that data field contain. Okay, are you with me? Yeah. The data field in the attestation contains the following field. Slot. Slot the attestation relates to. Index. Indices for attesting validators. Beacon block root. The root hash of the beacon block containing this object. Slot है index, indices for attesting validators. After that, beacon block root, the root hash of the beacon block containing this object. Source, the last justified checkpoint. And target, the last epoch boundary block. Hope I'll understand this after some time. Executing the transaction in the execution payload updates the global state. Executing the transaction in the execution payload updates the global state. All clients executing the transaction, the execution payload updates the global state. Execution payload update होता है. Where was the execution payload? Yeah. हाँ, execution payload transaction pass from the execution clients. Yeah, execution payload है जिसमें transactions stay करते हैं. Correct. Executing the executing the transaction in the execution payload updates the global state. All clients re-execute the transaction in the execution payload to ensure new state matches in the new block state root field. Executing the block transaction in the Ethereum payload updates the global state. Executing the transaction, the execution payload updates the global state. Executing the transactions in the execution payload. Transaction को execution payload में जब execute just fine. Okay. Executing the transaction in the execution payload updates the global state. All clients re-execute the transaction in the execution payload to ensure the new state matches that in the new block state root field. This is how client can tell how that a new block is valid and safe to add to the blockchain. This execution payload itself is an object with several fields. There is also an execution payload header that contains important summary information about the execution data. Organized as follows. भाई साहब मेरे को समझ में नहीं आया. मेरे को सच में समझ में नहीं आया क्या हुआ है. मैंने एक YouTube से वीडियो देख के आता हूँ फिर बताता हूँ. Okay, so we were in the execution payload. Actually, I didn't find much on YouTube. So let's just go through it for now, and I'll let you know if I find anything special about this at a later stage. The execution payload itself contains the following. Notice this is identical to header. Where gone? No, not this. Huh. Executing the transaction, the execution payload updates the global state. Execution payload updates the global state. All clients re-execute the transaction in the execution payload to ensure the new state matches that in the new block state root field. This is how clients can tell that a new block is valid and safe to add to their blockchain. So what basically is done, all the transactions, all the incoming transactions are just dropped into the execution payload, and that execution payload updates the global state, and all the clients re-execute the transaction in the execution payload in order to validate that all the transactions included in this execution payload are valid or they are just a fraud. All client re-execute the transaction in the execution payload to ensure the new state matches in the new field in the new block state root field. This is how clients can tell that a new block is valid and safe to add in the blockchain. So what we have read is all the other validators just check it themselves. So what was that checking part? It's this only. Like they re-execute the transaction in the execution payload to execute that the all new state matches in their new block state root field. Execution payload जो transactions हैं उनको they re-execute. This is how clients can tell that a new block is valid and safe to add in the blockchain. The execution payload itself is the object with several fields. There is also an execution payload header that contains important summary information about the execution data. Definitely सी बात है execution payload will itself be a large element, be a large object, be a large dataset. Itself is an object with several fields. There is also an execution payload header that contains important summary information about the execution data. These data structures are organized as follows. Now let's look at execution payload, like execution payload header, execution payload data, and it contains several other fields like parent hash, hash of the parent block, fee receipt, account addresses for paying transaction fees to, account address for paying transaction fees to, हाँ मीन्स फी रिसिपिएंट में वही होगा who's a block proposer. State root, root hash for the global state after applying changes in this block. Okay, so the state root contains the root hash. State root contains the contains the hash, root hash for the global state that will become after applying changes in this block. Oh my god, that is an amazing idea. You know why? Like, if I have created the block and I have forwarded, propagated it to someone else, then he cannot tamper with that block because I've also included the state root into it. If he'll do it, then he'll fucked. Receipts root. Hash of the transaction receipts tree. Right. It's something like the hash of the transaction receipt. Logs bloom. Data structure containing events log. There's a data structure, that's Bloom data structure, which contain all the transaction that allows, that provides a very fast retrieval of data. That's what log blooms, I hope, belongs refers to. Log blooms, it is a data structure that contains the event loops, all the event loops. Pre randau, randau. I think it's a French word. Randau. Value used in random validator section. Previous random value used in random validator section. Do you remember we read at earlier, like there's some random value which is used to select the next random validator. I hope that it's connected to some for to that only. Okay. Block number, the number of the current block, gas limit, maximum gas allowed in this block. Maximum gas allowed in this block. Gas use, actual amount of gas used in this block. Timestamp, the block time. Extra data, the arbitrary additional data as raw bytes. Base fee per gas. Extra data, just a second. Gas used, timestamp, ठीक है. Extra data, arbitrary additional data as raw bytes. Do you understand that this extra data is any sort of metadata, I hope, about the block? Fine. Base fee per gas. The base fee value. Base fee. Sorry. Block hash. Hash of the execution block. Block hash. Block hash means hash. जो block का डब्बे और hash. Transactions root. Root hash of the transaction in the payload. Root hash of the transactions in the payload. Root hash. Root hash. What does it mean? I don't know. Withdrawal root. Root hash of the withdrawals in the payload. Okay. Transaction root, withdrawal root, root hash. I think that all this is not making a lot sense to me. Like I just have to read it. What is root hash? What is root hash in withdrawal root? The execution payload itself contains the following. Notice this is identical to header except that instead of the root hash of the transaction, it includes the actual list of transactions. The execution payload itself contains the following. Notice this is identical to the header except that instead of the root hash of the transaction, it includes the actual list of transactions. So what were we reading just now? Execution payload header. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. This was about execution payload header. Execution payload header. And now we are going to read execution payload. Means execution payload contains execution payload header and there are some more fields which we are now going to read apart from execution payload header. Fine. I think that I should just take my lunch because I have to attend the meeting as well. So I'm just pausing it for now. But what, how much is left? So second, it's not much. It's not much. It's not much. But I'm very time constrained. So I'll continue. I'll continue after the meeting. Fine.